Wind kicked dust across the dry barn floor as the screen door slapped shut behind Silas Reed. He squinted at the horizon, a shimmer rising off the desert. The mule brayed once, restless in its pen. Then he saw it, a shape moving along the fence line. Too small for a man, too crooked for a coyote. Silas stepped off the porch without his cane. The limp slowed him, but not by much. The figure collapsed before the gate. Bare feet, thin arms, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. A child, a Comanche child. Silas knelt, knees popping like firewood. The boy's lips moved, but no sound came out. Skin like ash, ribs like fence wire. No more than 7, maybe 8. He picked the child up. He weighed less than Silas's saddle. Inside the barn, Silas laid him on the old cot, brushing hay off with a flat hand. The boy didn't flinch. He just stared up at the roof beams, blinking slow, like he wasn't sure if he'd made it or died somewhere in the dirt. Silas reached for the kettle, poured water into a chipped tin cup, and held it to the boy's lips. 2 swallows, then 3. The child's hands trembled as they gripped the cup. "You ain't got to talk," Silas said, voice low even. "Just drink." Out in the yard, the mule stomped twice. A hawk circled above, watching. The sky held that copper glow that meant sundown wasn't far. By the time the child finished the last bite of cornbread, his eyes had closed. He curled up without a word, fingers still gripping the edge of the blanket like it might vanish. Silas sat nearby on a hay bale, polishing a rust-bitten horseshoe with the edge of his shirt. He didn't look at the boy, just kept his hands busy. Night came down like a curtain. Coyotes howled, not close but not far either. Next morning, the sheriff showed up. His boots kicked gravel with impatience. 2 deputies stood behind him, thumbs grazing their belts. Silas leaned against the barn door, arms crossed, coat still dusty from last night. He didn't smile. "Morning, Silas," the sheriff said, not looking him in the eye. "Heard you got a visitor." Silas didn't answer. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Some folks in town saw tracks. Said they looked different, smaller." Silas raised an eyebrow. "Now I don't mean no trouble," the sheriff continued, glancing toward the barn. "But the way things are with the reservations and the ranchers losing cattle, you see a stray out here, you ought to tell someone." Silas stepped forward 1 pace. His voice was like dry rope. Boy was hungry. That all he was? "That's all I saw." A long silence followed. Wind tugged at the sheriff's coat. One of the deputies shifted uneasily. "Just saying," the sheriff muttered, backing off. "You feed strays long enough, they bring company." Silas didn't watch them ride off. He turned back toward the barn, eyes narrowed. Inside, the boy sat upright on the cot, alert now, watching. "You got a name?" Silas asked. No answer. Silas pointed at his own chest. "Silas." He waited. The child stared, then touched his own chest, softly, like unsure of the right to speak. But nothing came out. "All right," Silas said. "Don't need one." He placed a strip of jerky and a piece of bread on a wooden plate, left it beside the cot. Then he walked out to the porch, the screen door squealing behind him. From the rocking chair, he watched the sun bleed across the sky. No sounds but wind, hoofbeats in the distance, and the slow creak of wood underweight. The next visitor came at dusk. Martha Bell, who ran the church kitchen, rode up side saddle with dust on her hem. She didn't dismount. "Silas," she called, pulling her bonnet down. "I just heard." "Heard what?" "That you're harboring one of them." Silas didn't respond. Martha leaned forward. "The Lord asks us to feed the hungry." "Yes, but you know how people are. There's talk already. You should send him along to the fort." "No. He might bring danger." Silas stood. "He's a child." Martha stared at him, something cold in her eyes. "You always did see ghosts where others saw facts." Silas said nothing. She turned her horse and rode off without another word. Night again. The boy hadn't spoken a word, but Silas noticed the little things. How he stacked the tin cups neatly. How he touched the wooden carving of a horse on the shelf. How he sat straight when Silas sharpened his knife, eyes fixed but unafraid. Outside, thunder rolled from the north. Not storm thunder. Hooves. Silas stepped into the yard, lantern in hand. Dust curled at the edge of the hills. Too far to see clear, but enough to feel the change in the air, like the land itself holding its breath. The boy stood behind him now, barefoot in the doorway. Still no words. "Someone's coming," Silas said. The boy nodded once. Just once. And Silas, for the first time in years, felt the old weight on his shoulders. Not fear. Not yet. Just a knowing. He turned to the barn, opened the trunk at the back, and stared down at what he hadn't touched in 15 years. A cavalry saber, a rifle wrapped in oilskin, and a folded strip of cloth the color of dried blood. The boy said nothing. Neither did Silas. But they both knew the quiet wouldn't last. The sun hadn't broken yet. Only a band of orange on the horizon, like fire behind glass. Silas stood alone by the fence post, shotgun resting across his arms. The mule had gone silent in its stall. Even the wind felt tight, like it didn't dare speak. They were there, lined across the ridge. 200 riders. Not a sound from them. No war cries, no drumming hooves, just stillness. Their figures black against the rising light, spears upright, horses barely shifting, shadows with eyes. The boy stood beside him now, clutching the edge of Silas's coat. "They ain't here to raid," Silas murmured. "But they're here for something." From town, a thin dust trail curled toward them. The sheriff and half a dozen men on horseback. Rifle barrels glinted in the early light. "Too fast. Too loud. Stay inside," Silas said, but the boy didn't move. A single rider broke from the ridge. The warriors didn't flinch. She was tall in the saddle, with a braid down her back like a black rope. Her horse moved like it floated. Silas lowered the shotgun. The rider reached the gate, dismounted in one fluid motion. Her eyes scanned the barn, the boy, then Silas. She said something sharp, melodic, ancient. Silas responded in the same tongue, rougher from disuse. The boy's hand tightened. She stepped forward. Her face was painted not for war, but mourning. The boy let go of Silas's coat and ran to her. She dropped to her knees. No words passed between them, just the way her hands closed around his small frame, pulling him into the fabric of her dress. A breathless sound escaped her throat, half sob, half blessing. The boy whispered something in her ear. Her eyes turned back to Silas. She rose. "You gave him food," she said in accented English. "We give you honor." Silas inclined his head once. Then the sheriff rode in. "Back away, Silas," he shouted, rifle half raised. "She with the rest of him?" Silas turned. His voice dropped like cold iron. "Put the gun down. You see what's happening? They've surrounded you." "Put it down," Silas said again, quiet, final. The sheriff hesitated. His deputies pulled up short behind him, forming a line just yards from the barn. The warrior woman didn't blink. Her braids swung in the breeze. She didn't reach for anything, just stood between them all. Silas took a step forward. "She ain't here to fight. They're warriors," the sheriff hissed. 200 of them. That's a siege, Silas. They're family. He's one of theirs. He's one of them. Silas's face didn't change. "You saying that like it means something?" The boy looked up at the sheriff. Still didn't speak. Just stood by the woman, her hand now resting on his shoulder. From the ridge, the warriors watched. Not one moved. They didn't need to. Their silence said everything. "We can't just let this stand," the sheriff muttered. "The town won't have it." "You don't speak for the town," Silas said, stepping between him and the barn. "You speak for fear. And fear's loud, but it ain't smart." The wind returned, soft, dusty, curling around boots and stirrups. The sheriff lowered his rifle an inch, eyes twitching toward the line on the hill. "We let them walk. We look weak." Silas leaned on his cane now, calm as water. "No, we let them walk. We look alive." The woman took the boy's hand. She spoke again, her voice like water over stone. Silas nodded. "I understand." She turned and walked back to her horse. The boy hesitated, looked back at the barn, looked at Silas, then walked beside her. They didn't mount. Not yet. They just stood there, waiting. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He looked around at the men behind him, their rifles loose but ready. Silas stepped forward, standing between them all. "I've been on both sides of a barrel," he said. "I know how fast mistakes happen." Then he reached in his coat and slowly drew out a small object, worn leather and silver. A medal, tarnished, bent, still bearing the crossed sabers of a cavalry scout. He dropped it into the dirt. "Let that be enough," he said. "You want a war, you start it. But I'll end it." The sheriff didn't speak. Neither did his men. Silas turned to the woman and gave a slight nod. She mounted, lifted the boy behind her. They turned. From the ridge, the warriors began to shift. Quiet movement like the wind itself had changed direction. Horses turned, spears tilted, not a word spoken. They rode back into the desert. No battle, no blood, just the crunch of hooves and the long silence left behind. The sun rose, gold and unforgiving. Silas picked up the metal, wiped the dust from its edge, and slipped it into his pocket. Behind him, the barn door creaked open. Empty now, just the sound of wind and breath, and the quiet legend beginning to take root. "I say we ride on him now," barked Clancy Meyer, slamming his palm against the bar. Voices rumbled inside the saloon. Men stood shoulder to shoulder, sweat glistening on their brows despite the morning chill. Guns hung low and loose on hips, as if itching to leap into hands. Outside, horses stomped and snorted, nervous, like they could feel what the town was boiling into. The sheriff leaned against the doorway, arms folded, jaw clenched. "He fed one of them," Clancy shouted, "and now we got a whole war party sniffing around our land. That don't sit right." Preacher Ames stood near the back, arms crossed over his black coat. "They're gone," he said. "Didn't take a thing. Didn't hurt his soul." Yet Clancy snapped. "You think they just came to say thank you and ride off into the sunrise?" Another man muttered, "Saw myself. Had to be 200. Silent. Creepy like." The sheriff straightened. "Nobody's laying a hand on Silas. Not unless they want to draw their last breath." The saloon hushed. Then came the creak of the swinging doors. Silas Reed walked in, boots dusty, coat still unbuttoned. No weapon drawn, no words ready. Just eyes like cracked stone and silence thicker than whiskey. Clancy stepped forward. "You got a death wish? Walking in here?" Silas didn't answer. He walked to the bar, nodded to the barkeep. "Water." Clancy spat at the floor. "Ain't no water gonna wash off what you've done." Silas drank, then set the glass down, turned slow to face the room. "You boys want to talk," he said, voice dry. "Do it without your hands on iron." No one moved. Just the tick of the clock and the faint whistle of wind through the broken window pane. "I fed a hungry child," Silas said. "That's it. That's all. Same as you'd feed a stray dog in the cold." "You fed an enemy," someone growled from the back. "No," Silas replied. "I fed a boy who lost everything. His family burned in their sleep. Killed by men who don't ask questions, just shoot shadows." Murmurs spread. Silas's eyes scanned the room. His name was Wicody. I didn't need to know it to feed him. Didn't need to count the bones in his chest to know he was starving. Clancy stepped closer, hand hovering near his holster. "You think that makes you better than us?" "Makes you right." Silas didn't flinch. "It makes me human." Clancy went for his gun. The crack of metal echoed before his hand reached the grip. A spear, thin and fire-hardened, flew through the saloon window like lightning and skewered the wall beside Clancy's head. Men ducked. One screamed. Glass scattered across the floor. Silas didn't move. "They're watching," he said. "Every word. Every move. That spear wasn't a kill. It was to warn. You bring him back." The sheriff hissed, stepping up beside Silas. "They never left. Just faded back into the land. But you fire the first shot, and they'll finish what your ancestors started." Clancy backed away from the wall, face pale, pride wounded deeper than flesh. Silas turned, walked out into the dust-choked daylight. The church bell rang once. Preacher Ames caught up with him near the general store. "Truth is, they're scared, Silas," he said, falling in his step. "They remember stories. Ghosts. Raids. They think this is the start of something. It isn't. They don't know that." They stopped at the edge of the old churchyard. Wind moved through the headstones like whispers in prayer. "You want to help?" Silas asked. "I do." "Then tell them the boy wasn't a threat. He was a reminder." "Of what?" Silas glanced back toward the town. "Of who we've become." That evening, Silas stood alone in his barn again. A half loaf of bread sat on the table, untouched. He ran a hand along the edge of the cot, still warm from the night before. The silence felt heavier now, not watchful, just empty. He opened the chest, once more. Unwrapped the rifle. Cleaned it. Oiled the action. The cavalry saber lay beneath. He lifted it slowly, like waking a ghost. Its edge still held the memory of war, of lines drawn in blood, of orders refused. He sat down again. Let rest. A sound came from outside, boots on dirt. He stepped out into the night. A girl stood there, maybe 16. No hat, no gun, just a letter in her hands. "Sir," she said, voice shaking. "Mama says thank you." That child, she saw him before. He used to come to the back door. Didn't say nothing. She gave him biscuits once. Silas nodded. The girl held out the folded paper. "She wrote this. Said you'd understand." He took it. She turned and ran. Inside the letter, a drawing. A crude sketch of a child's face. Beside it the words, "You gave him peace." That's more than most ever do. Silas folded it gently. Slipped it into his coat pocket. Outside, coyotes howled in the hills. Not a threat, just a song. And Silas Reed stood alone in the barn light, still as stone, as a town struggled to understand the cost of kindness. The shot cracked through the night, like the sky split in two. Silas dropped to one knee, hand already on the shotgun by the porch rail. Smoke curled from the ridge above town, not lightning. Muzzle flash. The bullet hadn't been aimed, just fired, wild, high, panicked. Then came the ringing. The terrible silence after, when the whole desert held its breath. Torches flared to life across the distant ridge. The warriors were back. This time, they weren't still. Shadows moved like a tide, silent, ordered, inevitable. Riders formed a half circle around the town's edge. Spears shimmered in firelight. No war cries, no drums, only quiet and movement. Silas stepped out into the dirt street as doors slammed behind him. Lanterns flickered. The sheriff scrambled from the jailhouse, rifle in hand, boots half-laced. He saw Silas and froze. "They're surrounding us," he said. "I told you not to shoot." "I didn't." "I know." Clancy stumbled from the saloon, drunk and staggering, pistol waving. "I knew it. They were waiting." "Get back inside," Silas barked. "You already lit the match." The preacher appeared beside the church steps, hands raised. "Silas, they'll burn us down." "No," Silas said. "Not if I walk out." The sheriff grabbed his arm. "You'll die." Silas looked at him. Better one old ghost than a town full of graves. Then he started walking, down the middle of the dirt road, past the saloon, past the general store, past the still-burning torch that someone had dropped in fear. The town watched from windows, from cracks and shutters, from the dark places where guilt hides. Silas Reed walked out to the open field beyond the last fence line, coat open, unarmed. The rider stopped. The woman with the braid stepped forward again, same as before. This time, she dismounted before Silas reached her. Behind her, the boy stood, eyes wide, watching. She spoke softly in Comanche. Silas answered in kind. Then he turned, faced the town, and did something no one had ever seen him do. He raised his voice. It echoed off the canyon walls like thunder wrapped in gravel. "You want to know who I am?" he shouted. "Then look." He shrugged off his coat, let it fall in the dirt, rolled up his left sleeve. There, burned into his skin, old scars formed a mark, not military, not American. A symbol, curved and jagged, of the Comanche kinship, right. A brotherhood forged in war, sealed in blood. The woman stepped beside him and raised the same arm. Matched, twins in opposite worlds. Silas turned back to the townsfolk, many now standing in the open, too stunned to speak. "I rode with the U.S. cavalry," he said. "Then I rode against them. No one breathed. They sent me to burn villages," he continued. "I disobeyed. Took children, women, elders, led them out before the flames came. For that, they branded me a deserter. For that, I was spared by the ones I was told to kill." He looked down the line of torches. Faces painted, not with hatred, but memory. "They gave me a name, a place, a reason to live." He turned again to the town. "You fed me your silence for 20 years. Call me strange, kept your distance. Now I've fed someone else, and you call it betrayal?" The sheriff stepped forward. No rifle in hand now, just bare hands, open. "We didn't know. You didn't ask." The warrior woman raised her hand, gestured. One by one, the riders began to turn, silent, spiraling outward, a signal of peace. The boy ran forward, hugged Silas tight, then pulled away just as quick, like afraid to stay longer than he was allowed. Silas knelt to meet him eye to eye. "You remember what I said?" The boy nodded. "Then go." The child turned and ran to his people. The woman held Silas's eyes a long time, then mounted and rode off. Hoofbeats faded into the night, swallowed by the desert's vast breath. Next morning, the town was quiet. No one spoke of war. No one spoke of the night. The spear in the saloon wall had been removed. The preacher rang the bell once, not for a sermon, but a silence. The sheriff found Silas back at his barn, replacing nails on the fence line. He stood there, hat in hand, like a boy before his father. "You kept this place from burning," the sheriff said. "We owe you." "No," Silas replied. "You owe the boy. You ever going to tell them the rest?" Silas looked out across the dry hills. "Don't need to. They'll tell it themselves, one way or another." He picked up the fallen coat from the night before, brushed the dust off slowly. The sheriff turned to leave, but paused. "What was his name again?" Silas answered without looking. "Wakoti. It means still water." The sheriff nodded, then walked off, boots soft on the sand. Years later, children would gather near the barn to hear the tale. They'd sit wide-eyed as old voices whispered of a quiet scout who spoke 2 tongues and carried no gun, yet faced down 200 warriors without flinching. They'd speak of the night no one died, the morning no one forgot. And when they'd ask if the story was true, the old storyteller would smile beneath his hat and say, "Course it's true. I saw it with my own eyes. That boy, that bred that man. They didn't stop a war. They stopped the next one."